Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. I don't know how much time I have for recording this because right now I have some time, but I could get interrupted at any point. Just wanted to say that. So, it took me a bit longer to watch this movie than I originally planned. Um, because I'd started this movie on a Monday and I thought I'd be able to finish it that day, and then I got interrupted, and I have this movie in DVD, and there's like one room in the house that has a DVD player, and then I thought, oh, okay, I should be able to finish it on Friday then, to like pick up where I left off. I got like halfway through the movie, and then I wasn't able to, and then I got to watch like half an hour of it like a couple days ago, and then today we're now it's Monday again, so it's officially been a week. I finally got to finish the movie. That was a bit of a bummer. Um, because it's kind of easier to watch movies, when you can see them all in one viewing. It's kind of hard when it's like you have to wait several days to be able to finish something. So like I actually had forgotten some plot details, but that's why it's good that I have my notes and stuff to kind of jog my memory a little bit. I'm lucky that I've seen this movie before. This is actually the only Thor movie I had seen before I'd started watching these, and now I'm kind of bummed because this one is really fun. I think I liked it a bit more the first time I watched it, but this one's still my favorite of the Thor movies. And it's kind of a bummer because, like, the first one was good. The second one I have, like, no memory of. And then there's this one, which is really fun. They try to, like, make it a bit more comedic. And I feel like Thor, like, how he is as a character in the movies, because I can't say for the comics, I've never read them. I feel like he does work good in this more kind of, like, comedic hero role. And then there's a fourth movie which was made in 2022, which I've already recorded on YouTube TV. I thought I wouldn't be able to find it on there because in my head I was thinking, like, yeah, it came out last year, whatever. No, it came out in 2022. But the thing I'm bummed about is that this one was pretty good. I enjoyed it. And then from what I've heard from my friends, because they have a habit of mentioning when something's terrible, um, even if they're not going to watch it with me. They said the fourth one's really bad, and I've read some reviews, and it's kind of the agreed opinion that the fourth one is really bad. But, like, I'm trying to watch all these anyway, especially because I'd already watched Infinity War and Endgame. Which now, because of this movie, I never saw the after credit scene. Now the intro to Infinity War finally makes sense to me. But yeah, I'm gonna force myself to watch the fourth one. I don't know if it's worse than Thor the Dark World or not. We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out if it's like bad, or if it's just like instantly forgettable. That's a problem for me, future me. I might go watch a little bit of it after this review actually if I have enough time. Anyway, let me get my notes for this one. Let's talk about an actual good movie. Um, it had been a couple years since I'd seen this movie. Like when I originally watched it, like I don't think I was really watching the Marvel movies, and this one, I think, yeah, it came out before, like, Infinity War and Endgame. I think this is the one where it's, like, right before. So Thor talks about in the beginning of this one of, like, going to look for the Infinity Stones and not finding any of them. I like how it's this kind of intro where it sounds like he's talking to us, and then he's in this, like, cage. He's just talking to, like, a dead skeleton, and there's this, like, fire demon that is, like, destined to destroy Asgard and stuff. And it was this whole thing that Thor had dreamed about. And I think it's pretty cool that this character, I already forgot the name, like gets like introduced at the beginning of the movie, and then at the end they actually have to let Asgard, like the entire place and stuff, be destroyed in order to stop the main villain. And that's how the movie ends, with all the characters on the big spaceship and stuff. So this one is a bit more like comedy oriented after, like compared to the other previous Thor movies. And I find that interesting. It's like I want to say something, but I'm not sure if I'm right. And you know how I said I started watching the Marvel movies after like getting into Guardians. So I feel like with some of the ones I can like vaguely remember like a little bit bits and pieces of like before Guardians. I mean, weren't really as comedic. I feel like once those movies came out, or that specific movie, it felt like the Marvel movies were getting kind of more comedic and stuff, and I feel like I can notice that comparing this Thor movie to the other ones, and like sometimes I'm okay with it and sometimes it's like pretty funny. And that's, I think, my thing with this movie, where there's a lot of stuff that's still like really funny, like I wrote down a lot of jokes, and then there's some parts where it's like the plot kind of pauses for jokes that I just kind of felt more meh about. So I feel kind of mixed on the humor, but for the most part I liked it. Thor as a character also feels like a bit more snarky, but I think that's kind of fun. He was already kind of like that a little bit. They just kind of like amp it up a bit more. And a lot of the fights in this movie are really cool. Like he has a fight at the beginning against the like fire demon guy. That was pretty cool. Um, and then Thor ends up going back to Asgard, and Loki is there. And it's kind of funny because Loki is there, but he's like disguised as Odin. So it's like Anthony Hopkins having to say like Loki type dialogue, which is really funny to me. Um, like they have this stage play scene where it's like a stage play of the events of the first Thor movie, which is kind of funny to see now that I've like actually seen that movie. But it's in a way where it's like Loki dies and basically becomes like a martyr and stuff. And I completely forgot that Matt Damon was in this movie. He plays Loki in the stage play, and I just find that really funny. He's only in this movie for like a couple minutes. But yeah, that's great. And then, Loki notices that Thor's there and freaks out, where Thor's is like, oh, hi father, and Loki's just like, oh shit, and has to like try to stay away from him and stuff. And he's like revealed immediately. It's just funny with like compared to the previous movie, with the Dark World, I think it was, where like Loki being revealed to be on the throne or whatever. I thought it would be this like dramatic reveal, and then Thor comes back and like calls his bluff immediately and reveals his identity, and it's like no biggie, and it only lasts like a couple minutes. I like the part where they end up going to Earth, and Loki's like, "Oh yeah, I left our father on a retirement home in New York," and then it cuts to the building being destroyed. And then Doctor Strange is also in this, and him interacting with Thor is pretty funny. Where he just portals Loki away and like has Thor go to see him, and there's all this like magic bullshit happening when they're talking, where Thor is being like teleported around the house or whatever, and the whole reason Doctor Strange is talking to Thor is just like, yeah, I don't want Loki on Earth, so if I go to help you find your dad, are you gonna get him to leave or whatever? And then we also learned some other stuff that Jane had apparently like dumped Thor, which I'm curious about because she's in the first two movies. She's not in this third movie, which is why I didn't even know she originally existed, because this is the one I started out with. And then she's apparently in the fourth movie, but now that they've broken up, I'm not sure how that's gonna go for their character. I'm actually kind of bummed knowing she's gonna come back, just because I was like kind of meh about her character. Um, so they go to find their dad, Thor and Loki, and he's just like chilling in Norway the whole time. And I'm trying to remember, but I can't, from Endgame. When all the Asgardians are living on Earth. I thought it was in Norway or something, but I don't remember. But it's funny to me when their dad dies. It's like a serious scene, but he's basically revealing to Thor of like, oh yeah, you have a sister. She's gonna destroy Asgard. It's up to you and Loki to figure it out. I guess I'm gonna like die here. Bye. And then he like turns into gold dust or whatever. So we get introduced to Odin's firstborn, who's this lady named Hela, who's like the goddess of death. I think she's played by Kate Blanchett. She does a good job as the character. I really like her costume. It's kind of funny because, like, looking at Thor and his family members and stuff, Loki dresses differently from, like, the rest of them and whatever, of having, like, the green and the black hair and stuff. And, I mean, I know he's adopted and such, but, like, he has, like, a very different style compared to the rest of his family. And then Hela gets introduced, and she dresses in, like, a similar way, and now it makes Thor kind of look like the odd one out. Um, like, I thought Hela was cool. It's just you barely get to see her in this movie. I feel like she's very underdeveloped. Like, you're able to understand, like, her goals and everything, and she's, like, pissed off how, like, her and her dad used to fight side by side and were conquering civilizations, and that's how, like, Asgard got all its gold and stuff, which I find is a really interesting plot point. And then Odin basically, like, sealed her away and wanted to be, like, seen as good now or whatever, and was basically like covering up Asgard's history. So you understand why she's angry and how she is like the rightful person on the throne and everything, but you like barely get to see her. Like it'll cut back to her sometimes of like her in Asgard basically like threatening people and all of that. But yeah, that was kind of a bummer in that she's a cool villain, but they don't really do much with her. I do like how they establish her immediately as like a threat, where she just destroys Thor's hammer. I actually like the concept with this movie of Thor's hammer being destroyed because he kind of had a bit of like an over reliance on it and stuff, and he even gets it explained to him by his dad at like a crucial point later of like, oh yeah, it was used to like strengthen you, it was never where your power came from. And then I mean, he's able to use his electric abilities without it, though he doesn't really do it that much. It's only like a couple of times, like 3 times in the movie, which is like a bit disappointing. But yeah, he doesn't have his hammer for the whole movie, and he doesn't get it back at the end. I mean, I think he gets it back all the way in like Endgame, I believe, where he like literally has to build a new one. But I like that he gets to be hammerless, where he can't just like fly around and do cool shit with it. Kind of like brings down his power a bit. And then Loki ends up ruining everything where I forgot how they end up on this other planet in the first place, but they all get teleported. The three of the siblings get like teleported back to Asgard, but Hela's the only one that actually makes it, and she like takes charge immediately. And then pretty much almost the rest of the movie is like Loki and Thor and like a bunch of other characters are stuck on this like scrap planet or whatever, where Jeff Goldblum plays this guy named the Grand Master. He's pretty fun in that role. Where he's playing like a maniac, but he's still like kind of a bit silly. I don't really know how to explain it. And you meet this new character named Valkyrie. She's pretty cool. I was kind of confused about her name at first because that's also her like position, but that was like literally how she's referred to in the subtitles as well, where she's this like person that lives on the scrap planet, and then you find out she's part of these like warriors from Asgard, and now she's like this drunk, and they eventually do call her out on her drinking problem, and she's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna stop that or whatever. And she's like originally against Thor and kind of doesn't really give a shit about what's happening in Asgard, but she eventually joins his team, which is pretty cool. I like that you get to see her in Endgame as well, where she becomes like the new leader of Asgard, and Thor kind of goes to find its place in the world, I guess. So it's kind of nice knowing that information and then seeing her here again, where she's like introduced and stuff. There's a part, oh yeah, the scrap planet, I forgot it. I think it's called like Sakaar or something. There's a part when Thor gets there and he's being taken on this like digital tour about the planet, and I got so thrown off with the song Pure Imagination playing at that part. It's a really pretty version of the song, but it was like kind of throwing me off. But the tour segment's really funny because it's this robot voice saying like, oh, your insignificant life will matter now that you get to be like a gladiator, basically. Congratulations or something. And then you get to see Jeff Goldblum and stuff. And I find it funny that like Thor is basically gonna be like a fighter or whatever, fighter prisoner. And then meanwhile Loki is chilling and he's like already befriended the Grandmaster and like kind of works for him and stuff. And he's like manipulative but also social, so it fits. And you get to meet this guy named Korg. He's one of my favorite characters. He's really cool. He's like this big guy made out of rocks. He's like really, really chill, but also has some funny lines. I'm glad he got to come back in I think it was Endgame. I think he was the character that was playing Fortnite or something. There's this part where Hela, because you get to see her on Asgard every once in a while, where she is in their like treasure vaults and whatever, and she ends up passing by the Tesseract and said like, oh, this isn't that bad of a treasure or something. And like now that I know, like, oh yeah, there's just straight up an Infinity Stone. And there's a part later when Loki is like in the same treasure vault and also passes by the Tesseract and just kind of looks at it for a second, and I was like, is he gonna take it this time? But that doesn't happen till later. Oh yeah, the Stan Lee cameo in this one I thought was pretty nice, where he plays like an actual character this time, where he's this barber that ends up cutting Thor's hair. I actually forgot like the reason why it was shorter in the other movies, because it like stays short for a while. I don't I think it was, yeah, because it was short in Endgame and Infinity War. I'm trying to remember how it was at like the end of Endgame, but I think it like grows back by Thor 4 or something. Um, and then Thor ends up becoming like a complete brunette once he has the buzz cut. But it like doesn't really feel like Thor anymore. He just kind of looks like a gladiator. I guess also because of the outfit and stuff. But I do like that he gets like his sort of the winged cap back. I don't really know what the name of it is, but he gets that when he has to do some fights. And then he has a fight against Hulk. I also forgot that Hulk was in this movie, even though he's like literally on the poster. I find it funny he's on the poster because like his character isn't revealed till like halfway through the movie or something, where the entire movie they've been talking about the Grandmaster's champion or whatever, and then Thor gets to see him and he sees that it's Hulk and he gets like so hyped up and he's like, yeah, I know this guy. And then Loki's just like, oh shit, I need to get out of this planet. um but it's fun seeing them fight each other where Thor doesn't have his hammer, so they're like a little bit more evenly matched. Hulk actually does really well in that fight. I like the part when Thor ends up trying to calm him down, and then Hulk ends up beating him into the ground, and Loki just shouts out because he's like watching in the stands or whatever. He's like, yeah, that's how it feels, because like the exact same beatdown happened to him in the Avengers. And you get, like Hulk interacting with Thor like quite a bit throughout this movie. Sometimes they have to talk to each other about stuff. And he eventually does turn back into Bruce Banner, but it's only for like a little bit in the movie. And then he ends up deciding to become Hulk again, even though there's the chance he gets like permanently stuck like that. But I like how it was handled in this movie, where like once he's Bruce again, he realizes like, oh shit, I've been stuck as like the Hulk for 2 years and stuff. And it's kind of a little sad now that I've like finally watched Age of Ultron, because like that was kind of the last place of his memory and stuff, where he's wondering like, oh, did we save the city, did we stop Ultron? And then Thor, revealing that all that stuff was from like 2 years ago. Let's see, Valkyrie and Loki end up having a knife fight at one point. That was pretty cool. And then the movie does kind of end up getting a bit funnier, where it's like the four of them have to sort of work together to try to escape the planet. You get a lot of funny lines in there. I thought it was funny that like Loki and Thor almost seem like they get along, and then Loki double crosses him, which I feel like every time somehow in these Thor movies I keep getting surprised by that, where I'm like, oh, they're like sort of getting along, and then it's like, nope, they're on opposite sides again or whatever. Especially because there's like several scenes in like all of these Thor movies so far, including this one, where like Thor and Loki will have like a genuine heart to heart about something, and then it's immediately ruined like a couple scenes later. Hold on, I have to scroll through a bit. I also forgot, this is the one where Thor ends up losing his eye. I honestly thought it was going to be like in a bit more of a dramatic way, like it kind of was, where Hela is fighting Thor towards the end of the movie, and she hits him in the face with with her knife, and then kind of slashes his eye, or like where his eye should be, and he's like facing towards the camera, and it's just gone. With how like ruthless she is, I was kind of expecting it, because like I couldn't remember how the scene goes, that she was gonna like cut out his eye or something, like the same way you cut out like parts of a jack-o'-lantern. I know that sounds kind of weird, but no, it's just she slashes him, and then it's like, oh, his eye is gone. It's kind of weird to look at, where it's like, it doesn't really look like it's just, like the hole, like when you're missing an eye, it's like there's all this blood and stuff. Like, it's not too gory, but it's kind of like, whoa. Though he does cover it with an eye patch at the end of the movie. And then, oh yeah, the alien prisoners and stuff, they end up deciding to take Loki with them, because he's like, I think Thor had him electrocuted, not through his own abilities, but through a like tracker thing. And the prisoners find Loki when they're like trying to leave the scrap planet, and they're like, hey, do you want to come with us? Because, they don't know who he is or whatever. So then they all end up showing up in Asgard, and Loki just screams out to the Asgardians of like, oh, your savior is here or whatever. And then you get like a cool scene where all the characters are like fighting on the Bifrost Bridge against Hela's like undead soldiers or whatever. That was pretty cool. There's also a scene where Thor gets to talk to like the ghost of his dad. I find it interesting. All those scenes are like still on that same hill, like back in Norway, but basically saying like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter if Asgard's destroyed. I do like the whole concept of like it's a people, not a place, so they end up letting it get destroyed by the like fire demon guy, which that was kind of funny seeing that meme of the oh you can't defeat me but he can, and I'm so used to seeing it as a meme template where it's like the individual shots as like photos put together that it was really weird seeing that scene as like one continuous filmed scene. It like threw me off where I'm like, wait, I know these shots but why aren't they like paused or whatever. But I forgot that's like the big meme of this movie. That's like what's been so weird for me, like watching, like rewatching some of these Marvel movies, like this one, but also like watching a lot of them for the first time. Where it's like I'm finally seeing where all of these really well known memes are from, or being able to like recognize them immediately. Um, and then they all end up in this big spaceship at the end. And I like that Korg gives this little speech where he mentions of like, yeah, as long as Asgard still has its foundations, we could probably rebuild it. It could become like a safe haven for people and aliens and whatever. And then Asgard is like immediately destroyed right after. Um, and then it's kind of a hopeful scene at the end, and then it's ruined by like the end credits and knowing what's coming in Infinity War, where it's like, all of these characters are on this big spaceship, and Thor basically like becomes king at that point, and they plan to go to Earth, and then you see in the credits scene, which I'd actually not seen before, but it kind of explains a lot now. Where they plan to go to Earth. It's like Thor and Loki talking, and Loki's like, "Are you sure it's a good idea for me to go to Earth?" And Thor's like, "It's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine." And they both look up, and you're just like, "Oh shit, that's Thanos's ship," And then it would go to Infinity War from there, because I think this came out in 2017, so I think that's like the next movie or something. Where the start of that one is like Loki and several other characters end up getting killed, and the spaceship is crashed and Thanos is there, and then Infinity War starts. So it's kind of a little bit sad now that I have like all the context of that, of like how it connects and everything, where it's like, it's hopeful, like, okay, it's sort of bittersweet of like Asgard got destroyed, but they're gonna find a new place to live, they're gonna go to Earth, everything's gonna be fine. Thor is like king now, he's defeated his sister, and then they immediately get taken by Thanos, and I think everyone's killed, which I'm still wondering about that, because like Loki, for example, gets killed at like the start of Infinity War, and then that's it, and then you never see him again. But then they do have the whole thing where like, they use the Infinity Stones like in Endgame, and they end up reviving everybody. But does that include just like regular people that Thanos killed, or is it just like people that were killed by the snap? I don't know. See, this is why I'm like thinking, okay, I gotta force myself to watch the fourth Thor movie, even though unfortunately I know ahead of time it's going to be bad, because I feel like that's gonna kind of give me the answers I'm looking for. Plus, I'm like kind of curious after, like seeing Endgame and Thor ends up not being king and going off to do whatever. I'm like, what is he gonna go do next? It makes me curious too if the fourth movie is gonna be like the last Thor movie and stuff. I guess we'll see, because like it seems like with some of the Marvel movies it usually just ends up being a trilogy. Excuse me, sorry. And that doesn't apply to all of them, but that's something I've like kind of noticed, so I'm surprised we got a fourth one. But it also makes me kind of sad, because like knowing this one's good and then the fourth one's bad, where I'm like, why make a fourth one at all? But I've at least heard that like Christian Bale ends up playing the villain, so I'm kind of curious about that. We'll see. I'm actually going to go watch a little bit of it right now until inevitably I get interrupted or something. So that might also be a movie that takes me like a week or two to be able to watch the whole thing. It just kind of depends. Not because I get like bored or anything. It's just, it depends how much access I have to like a specific TV in the house. Alright, but that's my thoughts on this. This was a fun movie. It was nice to watch again. I'm actually glad I have it on DVD, because, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if I'd ever rewatch the first Thor movie, but this one I'm happy to have on DVD and to rewatch again sometime. It was nice to see it again, but especially after having the context of like the previous Thor movies, but you know, also watching Infinity War and Endgame, even though those ones come later, it I feel like kind of gives a different viewpoint for this movie, I guess. All right, bye bye.